Think about the last time you posted something online. Not because you wanted to share it, but because you wanted a reaction. Now here's the unsettling part. Some people don't feel that urge at all. They don't check who viewed their story. They don't explain themselves. They don't chase approval. And strangely, they're often the most mentally stable people in the room. But why? What happens inside the brain of someone who doesn't need to be seen, praised, or validated to feel real? And more importantly, what do they know that most people don't? By the end of this video, you'll understand why the brain of someone who doesn't seek validation operates on a completely different psychological system, and why the modern world quietly punishes people who develop it. 1. The known world versus the unknown world. Here's what we're taught. Validation equals confidence. Attention equals worth. Visibility equals success. That's the known world. But psychology reveals an uncomfortable truth. People who constantly seek validation aren't confident. They are outsourcing their self-worth. Every compliment, reply, or reaction becomes a microdose of emotional oxygen. And when it disappears, anxiety rushes in. Now, here's the contrast. People who don't need validation aren't stronger emotionally. They're operating from an entirely different reference point. Their nervous system isn't calibrated to applause, and that changes everything. But where does this difference come from? 2. The validation loop and why it traps you. Validation works like a psychological mirror. You look into other people's reactions to figure out who you are. The problem? Mirrors don't show depth, they show reflections. Psychologists call this external self-orientation. Your identity becomes a performance, and the brain learns a dangerous rule. I exist when I'm acknowledged. This is why silence feels uncomfortable. This is why being ignored hurts more than criticism. This is why degenerate content thrives, because it promises instant acknowledgement. But here's the twist most people miss. The brain adapts to validation the same way it adapts to sugar. The more you consume, the less it satisfies. So what happens to someone who stops seeking it? At first, withdrawal. Then, something else begins to wake up. 3. The internal anchor, the unknown world. People who don't need validation have an internal anchor. Their sense of self doesn't fluctuate with reactions. Psychologically, this is called self-referential stability. Their brain answers a different question. Not, do they approve of me, but does this align with me? And here's the misdirection. Most people think this makes someone cold or detached. In reality, it makes them emotionally efficient. They don't waste energy proving, explaining, or defending who they are. They move slower, speak less, but think deeper. And this is where the tension rises, because the modern world does not reward this trait. 4. Why this trait makes people uncomfortable. People who don't seek validation create psychological friction. Why? Because they break the unspoken social contract. They don't perform for approval. They don't reassure others with constant engagement. They don't signal insecurity. And the human brain hates unpredictability. So others project meanings onto them. They're arrogant. They think they're better. They're hiding something. But here's the obvious twist. They aren't above people. They're anchored within themselves. And that's rare. Scarcity creates gravity, which leads to the most counterintuitive part of this psychology. 5. The paradox of quiet power. People who don't need validation often attract it without trying. This isn't confidence, it's non-neediness. And non-neediness signals safety, competence, and self-trust at a subconscious level. The brain interprets it as, if they don't need approval, they must already have something. This is why silence can be powerful, why restraint feels dominant, why selective presence outperforms constant visibility. But here's the warning most people ignore. This trait cannot be faked. The brain detects performative indifference instantly. Which brings us to the final question. So, how do people stop needing validation? Not by being confident, not by pretending not to care, but by answering one uncomfortable question. Who are you when no one is watching? No audience, no feedback, no reaction. The people who don't need validation already live there, and that's why degenerate content can't hold them. Because once your identity comes from within, the noise outside loses its power. If this video made you uncomfortable, good. That discomfort is the gap between external validation and internal certainty, and crossing it is where real psychological freedom begins. I'll see you in the next one.